Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and today I'll show you how I pot up some of my bare root plants as a temporary measure before I put them into the garden. Bare root plants are a great option for trees, shrubs, and a lot of the fruiting bushes that I like to have in my garden. Typically, a bare root plant will arrive in a dormant condition. The idea being that they were sent from the nursery dormant. You put them into the ground while they're still dormant, and then as your conditions improve with moisture and warmth, the plants start to bud and they grow in the spot that you place the bare root plant. Sometimes, as I saw with my most recent order, the dormant plants arrive in a condition where the buds have already started to pop out and grow, and little leaves are starting to emerge. If you live in a nice warm area, that's probably not a problem in spring, because you can put it in the ground, the leaves will soak up the sun and the warmth, and they'll continue to grow. However, where I live in Colorado, we still have a number of very cold nights and potentially days ahead. And if I put these young, supposedly dormant, but now starting to grow leaf plants outside, that freeze may be enough to at least damage, if not kill, all those tender leaves. And that's happened to me before, where I've put a bare root plant in the ground expecting everything to be fine. We had a cold snap and the plant didn't recover. So in that instance, what I'll do is buy myself some more time. I'll take some of these bare root plants and I'll pot them up and put them in a nice, warm, well-lit condition. They'll continue to grow, those leaves will continue to develop, and at that point I'll start treating it like a nursery plant, where it reaches a point that the growth is ready to put outside. I'll harden off those plants, and then I'll plant them like any other potted plant. That's what I'm going to do with some of these plants that I received in this shipment, and that's what I'll be showing you shortly, is how I take a bare root plant, put it into a pot to buy myself some extra time. Now, you could do this as just a regular step for improving your garden, and a lot of gardeners do. I've done this as well. You take a nice big pot, and instead of putting your bare root fruit shrub, for instance, in the ground in your garden, you put it into a nice big pot and you let it grow in that pot, and it stays in that pot for its entire life. Growing citrus trees indoors or out on a patio follows this exact method. They'll typically arrive in a dormant condition. You put them in a big pot and they live their life in the pot. So whether you're doing this permanently or temporarily, the conditions are basically the same. You take a bare root, you put it in soil, you put it in a pot, and then you put it in a place where it can continue to grow. For the plants that aren't going outside right away and that I'm actually planning to put into pots because they budded out, I started by wrapping the roots in wet newspaper and then placing them in a plastic trash bag until I can get to them individually and put them into pots. Shortly before I put these bare root plants into the pots, I'll take them out of the plastic bag and remove the newspaper that I had wrapped around the roots. And just as though I were putting these outside, I'll place them into a tub of water temporarily just to help hydrate the roots before I put them into the pots. I'll do this with all of the plants that I'm going to put into pots, and just let them sit here for a few minutes before I take them to the next step, which is to add the soil and put them into the temporary container. This is a black consort currant bush. I love currants, and the best way to get them, in my opinion, is to get them bare root, because you can save some money from buying a full-size bush. But this has already started to leaf out, and I know that if I put this in the ground in my garden here, this plant wouldn't survive the cold temperatures that are coming. So I'm going to put this into a pot and just let it sit for a little bit, growing healthier, putting out the leaves, and I'll put it out in about a month. This is another opportunity to inspect the plant. this has some really nice root growth. In fact, for some gardeners that would be potting up a plant like this, it might have even too much root growth. And so you might consider pruning some of these longer leaves, especially if you're going to put this into a big pot as its permanent location. Because this big root right here, if it's in a pot, it has the potential of growing to the edge and then continuing to grow in a circular pattern until basically it encircles the entire root. And in worst case scenario, a root like this could actually choke all of the other roots if it circles back and forth in the pot. So if this were a permanent potting up, I would definitely cut some of these roots. But because this is just temporary for me, I'm going to leave these roots in place until I put it in the ground. I've got a couple of my recycled pots. These were all pots that had some other plant that I put into the garden in last year or previous years. And I'm actually going to try to select one of the biggest, widest pots I have to handle all of this root growth. And then I'm just going to put a simple potting mix and then put the plant in. Now, I don't want to hurt these roots. As I mentioned, I'm not going to prune the roots. Because this is temporary, I will actually encircle these roots on purpose just to hold into the pot. And then as I add more of the potting mix, I want to make sure that I try to eliminate as many, if not all, of the air pockets around the roots that I can. The roots are nice and moist because I had them soaking for about 10 or 20 minutes. And so there's not going to be a big change with this moist potting mix and the moist roots. But I do want to eliminate as much of the oxygen and the air pockets. And so I'll just firm down the soil up to the level where you saw or can see that there are roots coming from the main stem. So it's kind of hard to see because of the plant tag, which I'll leave on, but there are roots that are emerging right here from the base of this plant tag. So that's the level that I'll fill the potting mix. And this is one of those instances where you want to try to cover all the roots, and you want to try to get the level of the soil up to where it was growing before, but it's not critical because, again, this is just a temporary fix. This is just an opportunity for me to keep this plant alive until it's robust enough to put outside and be able to handle the weather conditions here. So I'll keep following this process with the rest of my bare root shrubs and bushes, and I could water it right now, but because I move relatively quickly, I'm just going to put a line, like you see behind me, of the other plants I've done and the plants that have yet to come, and I'll get it all filled up. Even though the roots were soaked in water for a little bit and I used a moist potting mix, I'm still going to go back and water each of the plants that I've put into a pot. You want to do a pretty good soaking because not all of the soil was wet. There were some dry particles in there, but you also want to help get this soil settling down around the roots. Like any other plant, you want to keep the soil moist, particularly these. I'm going to be moving them to the greenhouse here shortly. They have a tendency to dry out pretty quickly in the warmer, sunnier condition of the greenhouse. And so I'll be watering these at least every day, sometimes probably twice a day when we have the really hot conditions and the really sunny conditions. I'm not that worried about them being exposed to the sun right now. I'm not worried about hardening them off, so to speak, by moving them into the greenhouse because the buds are just starting to pop. And so the sun and the warm conditions of the greenhouse will actually be a great opportunity for them to put on some really good, robust leaves. If these had been sitting in the box longer, if the leaves had actually arrived in a yellowed condition, I might not be so quick to put them in the greenhouse. I might just put them underneath some of the lights inside, or maybe in a slightly shady condition until those leaves were green and lost that tenderness that the yellow tends to make when they are shipped in a box. But for now, these will be going outside, and I'll just let them grow until they're the equivalent of a potted plant that I'll put into the ground. A short while ago, these plants arrived in a plastic bag in a cardboard box as bare root plants. And now I put them into pots and put them in the greenhouse, where they'll sit in warmth and light and grow into plants with full leaves ready to go outside. Like any potted plant, they will need to be hardened off before I put them into their permanent location, just so they get used to my weather conditions. You'll need to follow the same basic format if you decide to do this temporary measure. If you want a permanent bare root plant in a pot, you can keep it in a greenhouse or move it outside once the weather starts getting warm, but the same basic conditions apply. Now, you might not have a greenhouse, but if you've got a nice sunny window in your house or a well-lit room that stays warm, you could put your potted plants into that location as well, and they'll do perfectly fine. Either way, bare root plants are a nice way to go, but you may need to pot them up. And there you have it. That's how I pot up bare root plants to gain a little extra time before they go outside. If you have any questions, let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe and maybe give me a thumbs up. I appreciate it. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.